Welcome to this explainer. We're going to take a really fascinating factory tour of the microscopic biological engines that literally power life as we know it. We so often think of biology in terms of these static, rigid cells, right? But the truth is, down at the microscopic level, things are constantly moving, sweeping, and swimming. So today, we're diving straight into the hidden machinery that makes all of that movement possible. Let's kick things off by defining these structures using their literal Latin roots, because it really paints a perfect picture. Cilia actually means eyelash, while flagella translates to little whip. Basically, these are microscopic, thread-like structures built entirely for motion. And what's super interesting is that while they operate on the outside of the cell, they actually originate entirely inside the cell, from these things called basal bodies. Think of them as the tiny oars and outboard motors of the cellular world. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll meet the microscopic motors. Second, we'll explore their biological habitats. Third, we're decoding the ultrastructure blueprint. Fourth, it's cilia versus flagella. Fifth, prokaryotes versus eukaryotes. And finally, sixth, we'll wrap up with their essential functions for life. Let's get right to it. Section 1. Meet the microscopic motors, an introduction to the engines of life. The history behind studying these structures goes back surprisingly far. The actual presence of the flagellum, that was first reported way back in 1868 by Engelmann. And then just a couple of decades later, in 1887, Janssen was the first to map out the structure of the sperm flagellum. Think about that. We've been trying to reverse engineer these tiny biological engines for over a century and a half. All right, moving on to Section 2, exploring their biological habitats. Exactly where do these things operate? Well, to put it simply, they operate practically everywhere. These structures are basically nature's most adaptable solution for movement. Their occurrences are incredibly diverse. We're talking single-cell protozoans, the flame cells of flatworms, the Bipinnaria larva of a starfish, collar cells of sea sponges, and even algae zoospores. But wait, it gets much closer to home. We also find them working right inside the human body. They line your windpipe to continuously sweep away dust, and they line the fallopian tubes too. It's this incredibly universal design applied to literally thousands of different biological challenges. Which brings us to Section 3, decoding the ultrastructure blueprint. Let's go inside the machine. Okay, check out this 3D cross-section from an electron micrograph. What you're seeing here is that both cilia and flagella actually possess the exact same internal architecture. Right down the middle, notice that bundle of filaments? That is called the axoneme. It's anchored right at the bottom by the basal body, and the whole thing is wrapped in a continuous, protective coat of plasma membrane. Honestly, structurally speaking, it looks an awful lot like a deep-sea communication cable. Now, if we zoom in even closer on a transverse section, like slicing it right in half, you can clearly see this absolutely classic 9+2 arrangement. It's just a brilliant piece of structural geometry. See how there are 9 peripheral doublet microtubules forming that outer ring, and they totally surround a pair of single microtubules right in the center. Notice, too, how those central filaments are enclosed by a central bridge, and they hook up to the outer doublets via these tiny little lines. Those are the radial spokes. And the whole shebang is constructed almost entirely out of a protein called tubulin. But here's the real magic. How does this thing actually move? How does it translate chemical fuel into a mechanical beat? Well, attached to those outer microtubules, you'll find pairs of arms made of a protein called dynin. And dynin is the true engine here. It acts as an ATPase enzyme. Basically, it hydrolyzes ATP that simply diffuses over from the cytoplasm. When that chemical reaction happens, boom, it releases the free energy required to physically drive the power stroke and the return stroke. Pure biological horsepower. Let's jump to Section 4, cilia versus flagella, comparing the models. So to really picture this, think of the difference between a massive Viking longship with hundreds of oars versus a speedboat with just one big outboard motor. With cilia, a single cell is going to have numerous, much shorter structures that move in a highly coordinated, vibratory, pendular fashion, exactly like a team rowing oars. Flagella, on the other hand, they are much longer and way sparser, and their movement is non-coordinated, creating this undulating, wavy, whip-like motion. So it's the exact same internal engine we just looked at, but with entirely different driving styles. Section 5, prokaryotes versus eukaryotes, ancient versus modern engines. This comparison is wild because it perfectly highlights a major evolutionary leap in cellular machinery. Prokaryotic cells, like your simple bacteria, they run on a stripped-down version. Their flagella are unmembranous, they completely lack that beautiful 9+2 pattern, and they're made of just a single monofibrinoir fibril composed of a protein called flagellin. It's basic, but hey, it's effective. Eukaryotic cells, though, the more complex ones that make up you and me, we utilize the luxury model. Ours are double membranous and multifibrillar, meaning they contain 11 total fibrils of tubulin. And of course, they feature that highly advanced 9+2 arrangement. And that brings us to our final section, Section 6, Essential Functions for Life, the Macro Impact. So why does all of this actually matter? Well, because without these structures, essential biological processes would literally grind to a halt. We're talking organism locomotion, or setting up currents to draw nutrition and respiratory gases into a tiny paramecium. Then there's the vital everyday task of eliminating solid waste and trapped dust from our very own respiratory tracts. Oh, and they also move nephric filtrate right through the kidneys. In amphibians and mammals, cilia even act as a biological conveyor belt to drive eggs from the oviduct. They are performing non-stop, absolutely essential work across almost all branches of the animal kingdom. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Without these microscopic whips and lashes, how would the engines of life keep turning? The next time you take a deep breath, or even just clear your throat, take a second to remember the literal millions of microscopic, ATP-powered 9+2 engines silently sweeping away inside you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the incredible mechanics of the world around you.